I would believe so, Toivo, because to enact this legislation requires political will. I recall, in the previous role, I was very, very engaged in these processes around access to information legislation in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, etc. I recall that the legislation was passed in Malawi. I can't recall exactly, but it was just lying there and pending for more than 5 years before its government actually started taking steps to implement it, to operationalize it. In our case, I think we could have done it faster. I know that there are lots of activities behind the scenes on the part of government who has been training information officers. I know that businesses and other government entities are well aware of the requirement in terms of having to have in place dedicated information officers. All these things come at a cost. But again, this is a critically important office that does not just serve the media. It really is, an office that is a mechanism that is going to serve all of society. And the delay in that is going to affect how we are being seen globally, because it speaks to issues of transparency and accountability. And when we as a country are talking about, our green transition and all these investments in energy, etc., the issue of transparency and accountable is front and center. And an Access to Information Act that is implemented in a manner that shows integrity, independence of that office is going to change, perceptions of Namibia as a country.
Yeah. Talk to me, Zoe, about people talk about the state actors and how they engage with the media, and that can weigh on the ranking, especially if your senior government officials in their engagement with the media seem to be, intimidating and stuff like that. But I saw in the Namibian not too long ago, there was an article, I think if I remember correctly, it was Zelna Hengari who was being interviewed by the Namibian. She's of course not a state official, she's a normal citizen like you and me. And she used, I think, sorry for saying this, but she said apparently futsek, idiot or something like that. But of course, she, like I said, she's not a state official. But from time to time, you hear that kind of language coming from government officials themselves, ministers, and even suggestions to control, to tighten the control of the media and stuff like that. What is it that must we do as a country, especially at government level, to ensure that we don't keep slipping down the pecking order? I'm actually surprised that we're at number 2, because I thought, I feared for the worst, but I'm glad that we are at number 2.
Well, I'm happy. As I said, I'm happy to concede the first place to South Africa in 2025, but I was really, really taken aback in 2024 when we were overtaken by Mauritania.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because if you looked at the Afrobarometer statistics, even Mauritanians themselves had absolutely no trust in their media, and didn't think that the media was playing any particular role or value in a democracy, as far as you could refer to a democracy in Mauritania for that matter. But to answer your question, Toivo, I mean, as media professionals, and I mean, it's a tough job, and you are going to get flack from many people that are not going to want to provide you with the information that is required, who do not understand the role of the media in society, and for that matter, I mean, let's just speak about private citizens who, for that matter, have lost absolute trust in the media and does not want to engage, with traditional media anymore. And then, I mean, that's just one aspect. Then you have politicians or public servants who tend to forget that they have an obligation to provide information to the media.
Yes, heavy vehicles are involved. What the statistics say is that they only represent 3%, about 3% of crashes. But when it occurs, normally it's disaster. So we have obviously a problem along, especially from Walvis Bay to Katima, Walvis Bay to the north, especially the Walvis Bay to Katima road, where we have Zambian trucks who has this tendency of following each other very closely, and they can be up to 10 or even more. We have engaged them. We're now going to engage their owners of these trucks, because I think they, according to the drivers, they were given instructions by the owner not to lose each other. So they must be together always for security reasons. And I think it's a phenomenon in South Africa where they are more under threat of hijacking and so on. But they also apply it here. And we are going to engage with them and say, look, Namibia is very safe. And we had a couple of crashes that involves the Zambian trucks and Zambian drivers. I think we lost one around about January or so. So heavy vehicles are a problem, and it's a problem because of the cargo from Walvis Bay. Cargo that most of it should have gone to the railway. Unfortunately, our railway is not yet able to accommodate most of the cargo. I don't have the numbers here. So we are really engaged with them. Tomorrow there is an event involving trucker safety at Swakopmund. Some of our colleagues are there. So it's to engage with them so that we also make sure that they adhere to road traffic rules and that they are part of the effort to save lives. Like I said, it's a margin, but when a crash occurs and there is a vehicle that collides with a truck, normally it's a mass casualty case. So our call is for our drivers to also be doing what you have done. Now, the culture in Namibia is that if I see the oncoming driver has already made that mistake, instead of also accommodating such a mistake, I don't slow down, I don't do anything, I flash and hooter. So we also need to be able to say, look, that guy is already on my lane. What is it that I can do to save lives? And you should be able, if you are able to really slow down and go off the road, it's the best that you can do. And we want our drivers to at least have that at the back of their minds, to say, even if you are on your lane, you're doing the right thing, you should also be able to respond should someone else make a mistake.
What about public transport providers, especially long distance combis, and now we see more and more 7-seaters. What percentage of involvement in accidents do you find with public transport drivers? Because I know in the past there was a perception that it was very dangerous, especially with 7-seaters. Although I don't know, what do the statistics show us?
Yeah, no, the statistics says that public transport accounts for between 9 and 15% of crashes in Namibia. So the major problem in Namibia is us, private vehicles. Accounts for 70%. 70% is them, then you have about 9 to 15% public transport, then you have the 3% trucks, and then the other percentage would be your company cars.
Yeah.
So our major problem is not public transport. It's not 7-seaters. It's private vehicles. Unfortunately, when it occurs with a public transport vehicle, the numbers are high.
Yes.
So, and I think it's because of that we focus mostly on them to say you are carrying a lot of passengers, you're carrying a lot of lives, so you should at least be able to be safe on the road.
We thank the government for that substantial allocation. It's better than not having anything. You would maybe recall that over the past year and a half or 2 years, the NFA has had to dig deep in its own pockets. NFA is not a profit-making institution, but from its savings, it had to fund the activities of the national teams, not just the national team, the national team. So this allocation by government through Treasury comes and it's very welcomed. It will be used for what is intended. And you know, when we talk about the national team, the national teams, particularly the senior men and women, that's why they are called national teams. They belong to the nation. The nation must fund the participation of these national teams in international competitions, whether it's COSAFA, whether it's AFCON or CHAN or World Cup qualifiers or the competitions proper, including friendly matches, because you do not prepare properly if you do not have friendly matches. So it's the responsibility of government to take care of the national teams, which is the teams of the nation. The NFA merely administers in terms of getting these teams ready, entering them as the custodian of football in these competitions. But in terms of the funding, that really should come from the government, as it has been all these years. So we are thankful that that has been considered. We are equally thankful that the government has prioritized sports as a number 2 priority after agriculture, and maybe top of that would be football. We have also heard expressions by our ministers of sport or responsible for sport, both the minister and deputy minister. They've been around. In the first week since their appointment, we have had meetings with them. We are very pleased with the sentiment they've expressed. They pay a high premium to the facilities issue, that sports must be elevated to a level where it can become a full employer, that the player doesn't have to go to work or to whatever else during the day and come to training at night. We want players to be fully professional. We support the support we get from our ministers and therefore from our government, and prioritizing sports to that extent really speaks about the excitement that we have as the FA, and I'm sure other sports codes also have that same excitement, that football and other sports codes have become a priority. So that that budgetary allocation should be seen in that spirit, that it is government's responsibility to fund the participation of our national teams in international competitions. Because when and I can tell you, I always say this thing and I don't tire to say it, football determines the mood of society. Somebody that doesn't know any player in the national team gets very angry when the national team loses. And equally, they get excited when the national team wins. Our bars, the opening and closing of those, are determined by whether we lose or win. And therefore, it's a national team. And the nation must take care of its team. Just as we throw pebbles to the national team when it doesn't do well, when the coach, we think he doesn't have the best formation. It's in the spirit of us all owning that team. But one person is in charge of making sure he selects the best team as he deems necessary. But overall, it's a national team. The funding must come from government and from Namibians, for that matter.
Yeah. And just for the record, how much has been allocated to NFA in the current financial year? Did I see 40 million somewhere?
40 million. You wanted to say billion. Hey.
I wish it was 40 billion.
We were going to be very excited. It's 40 million.
Okay, no, wonderful.
Yes.
That money, Isa, could be, it's actually really a decent allocation, but there are also expenditures beyond your control as the FA, such as playing matches abroad, home matches of the Breweries and other teams abroad, because we simply have no facilities accredited to host international matches. It would have been much more. That allocation would have meant a lot more if you didn't have to do some of those things. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you in where I come from, we would say you are exactly correct. When you look at the 40 million in isolation, you look at it as a lot of money. But when you contextualize the 40 million with regard to what we have said, that we don't play our home matches at home. When we played our home matches at home, remember we also take care of the ground transport and accommodation of the visiting team. Now we take care of our own cost to transport our own national team to a foreign country, pay for accommodation on that end, and also the visiting team, its ground transport and hotel accommodation and other necessities as prescribed by the football governing bodies. That is at our cost. So that 40 million then is reduced significantly in terms of how you could have used it had we had the opportunity to play at home. And that's why I like the energy put behind us having to come back, us having to make sure that facilities are upgraded or renovated or whatever the action may be there, so that we can bring the Brave Warriors and the Gladiators back to Namibia, so that we minimize on the cost that we now spend. And maybe just put it in context. When you book a facility, that's already a couple of hundreds of thousands.
Earlier we discussed the 130,000 plus entities that remain non-compliant to their BO disclosure obligations. Obviously, there may, if you just look at Windhoek, drive around, you see a lot of apartments, sectional titles, townhouses. You are in the CBD, you see a lot of buildings. You drive in the countryside, you see a lot of farms. A lot of, and these houses, buildings, and farms are what we call immovable property. Now, a close corporation or a company may hold or may own property. And as such, as we know that there are a lot of people out there that actually bought a flat or an apartment or a townhouse in a close corporation for various reasons, or maybe a lot of farms that are, or buildings that are in PTYs. So what happens to the immovable property the minute that these businesses get deregistered? So this is a very serious matter, and this is one of our biggest concerns as the registrar, because the minute that this entity gets deregistered, let's say it held property, whether it's a farm or an apartment, and prior to the deregistration, there was no transfer of ownership from the CC or from the PTY to the member or the actual owner, the entity will get deregistered, and then the property would now vest in the state. So the state would now own this property. There's a legal terminology for it. It's called bona vacantia, and it's when ownership has been vacated and this property or even movable property is now without ownership. So it now goes to the state. And how do you get back this property? There are two ways. You can either now write to the interim owner, which would now be the state, through the right channels. But in most cases, it would be that you need to make an application to court.
Okay.
And that is money, time, and effort.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you could restore this entity if it is a CC. And then by virtue of restoration, you would then get your property ownership back. So it's a very serious matter. And people don't realize it. In fact, there are a lot of people, and we had this conversation a few months back, there are a lot of people that own property, but they don't know that the property is registered in a close corporation.
Yes.
A lot. Or people own farms, and they might have known, but as the years passed, you even forget that this farm is owned by a company.
Yeah.
And in those instances, it becomes very, very dangerous for these entities when they are deregistered.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, the implications are significant.
Yes.
Yeah, but I imagine it's not just in terms of home ownership. There must be so many implications.
Yes, very serious implications. And I've done various other interviews over the last couple of weeks, and people have said, but I don't own a business. Why should I be worried? Why should I even listen to this interview?
Yeah.
And I've continuously said that it affects the ordinary person on the street, whether you own a business or not. Let's take this example. Say you are employed by a locally registered business.
Yeah.
This business is non-compliant to its bureau obligations, and this business gets deregistered. What happens then is, once this business is deregistered, it ceased to exist.
Yeah.
Which means that if it held accounts at various financial institutions like bank accounts, the banks or financial institutions are now obligated to restrict transactions on this account, because technically and legally this entity does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
So the people that are employed by this business may ultimately feel the brunt, as they may not have salaries paid in time. Creditors and suppliers may not be paid at all or in time, because now you may have to follow a different legal process to get hold of the funds. You have to show, etc., etc. And the banks are very clear, because there have been directives issued by the Financial Intelligence Center as it relates to non-compliant businesses, because ultimately it's a risk to our financial system.
Yeah.
A business that is non-compliant, there may be illicit flows of money into the country or out of the country, and our country as a whole is also at risk. So that is one implication, for instance. How is the ordinary Namibian affected in other ways? Through procurement. Let's assume that there are Namibian companies that are registered here. They are non-compliant, but they may have been awarded procurement tenders. Let's take a very simple example of medication, whether it's life-saving medication, heart medication, blood pressure medication, or even oxygen.
Yes.
So this entity has the tender to supply Namibian government with this medication. They are non-compliant, they are deregistered. So what happens is they can no longer fulfill their obligations under the award that they've been given, because they don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means that this contract, there's a breach in contract, and the contract has to be ended. So what happens to then the various state hospitals around the country that was relying on this medication or oxygen to be delivered? So that affects the ordinary Namibian sitting there, because you may be in hospital, you may be in need of oxygen or medication. So it's very serious.
Yeah.
And as BIPA, that's why we took so long to get to the stage of deregistration, because we know the implications are so serious. And that's why we've also done a lot, at least in terms of public education, to drive. Let's say there's a company that has a tender along, let's say, the airport road, for instance. It's almost done, and I'm just making an example. I'm not saying the one that has the tender to the airport road is non-compliant. But let's say they have a tender to any road in the country that is maybe critical for us to finish, that may help with logistics, that may help with decentralization of services. If they are non-compliant, they are deregistered. Upon deregistration, they don't exist, which means that that road that was supposed to be finished may also now lie idle
Yeah.
until a new contract is awarded. And there are so many other implications. These are just a few for people to really understand that even though you don't own a business, you know someone that does. And it's your responsibility to tell them, listen, go to BIPA's website, go to BIPA. Maybe they own property and they don't know that the property is in a CC.
Yeah.
So that is why we are calling on the ordinary Namibian to spread the message on our behalf.
But the deadline of 16 May has passed.
Correct.
So is there still time to save your organization, your company, or your property, as the case may be?
There's a small window, Ghetto. We've not extended the deadline at all. There's a small window for businesses to still creep under the mat. And why am I saying that is our earlier discussion on has any business been deregistered yet? And I told you that it's a process for deregistration.
Yeah.
So if there are businesses that would come in the next couple of days or maybe a week or two that still hand in, we are not going to say no, we won't take it. On condition that your business is not already at an advanced stage of deregistration. Because once that is done, then we cannot pull back, because we are as BIPA, we are an administrative body in terms of law, and once we've taken an administrative decision, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse that decision, because in law we become functus officio, which means that we cannot overturn our own decision. Then it must be done through then a court or so forth. So that is why there is that small window for businesses to still come out.